Greetings. I am Daniel Stepner, Artistic Director of the Aston Magna Festival and Foundation. We are a collective of musicians devoted to the performance of early music with period instruments and in period styles. 2022 will mark Aston Magna's 50th anniversary. Today's program features four of us: Peter Sykes playing harpsichord, Laura Jeppesen playing viola da gamba, Andrea Leblanc on baroque flute, and myself on baroque violin, playing music of Johann Sebastian Bach. The sonata you just heard is one of only 3 surviving works by Bach for violin and continuo, or violin and harmonized bass line, here represented by the viola da gamba and the harpsichord. Given the rather confusing quirks of labeling in Bach's time, that sonata might have been called a solo sonata for violin, or alternately a duo sonata, more accurately reflecting its 2 essential voices. Bach may well have composed other works for this combination. A good deal of his output was tragically lost after his death. But the works that have survived, the cantatas, masses, passions, concertos, sonatas, myriad keyboard works, chamber music, and solo violin and cello music, constitute a huge collection of masterpieces. A Bach revival beginning in the mid-1800s, nearly a century after his death, led to an international effort to find and publish all of his works. This is an ongoing endeavor that has made Bach into a sort of a demigod. Research and new discoveries continue to this day. Bach was a church musician, but he composed secular music as well as sacred. Many of his sonatas and concertos seem to have been written or rewritten for a coffeehouse concert series in Leipzig, which Bach led for 12 years at the height of his career. The sonata you will hear next, from this period, is for flute and harpsichord. Unlike the violin sonata you just heard, a duo for 2 voices played by 3 instruments, this sonata is technically a trio played by 2. The harpsichordist plays 2 distinct voices, one with each hand, and the flutist plays the third. The manuscript score for this sonata had a 46-bar gap due to lost pages. That lacuna has been painstakingly reconstructed by musicologists. Like the violin sonata, it seems to have been composed in the 1730s and possibly first heard at Zimmermann's Coffee House in downtown Leipzig. Bach's outer life, when compared, say, with that of his peers Handel, Vivaldi, or Telemann, was relatively uneventful, one might even say rather dull. Handel and Telemann, and to a lesser degree Vivaldi, were celebrated internationally during their lives, having been published widely, having traveled considerably in Europe, and having composed operas, that increasingly popular entertainment of the time. By contrast, Bach, the devoted family man, never left German-speaking territory. His life was essentially spent within a small radius in Thuringia and Saxony. He was primarily known among his peers as a church organist, a teacher, and an improviser at the keyboard. Those familiar with his compositions knew him to be a master of the old-fashioned contrapuntal art of canon and fugue, rather than as a creator of lighter, more fashionable music. Bach could certainly compose a good tune, but what he did with that tune and what he intended his music to be for, these are the things that give him his unique stature. He himself said that music was meant to be for the glory of God and for the refreshment of the soul. Bach was a devout Lutheran who looked to Scripture and to the sophisticated musical traditions of the past for his primary inspiration. But his message was clearly universal and meant to be timely. In his chosen texts, and perhaps even more so in the essence of his music, he spoke to his peers, and of course he has reached untold millions since, across all parochial barriers and national borders. Bach wrote no operas. However, his cantatas and passions employ operatic techniques and forms and are often profoundly dramatic in an internal, philosophic, religious sense. His secular cantatas and his instrumental music, as you have just heard, are no less impassioned, no less lavishly detailed. Very little of his voluminous compositional output was published during his lifetime. Those who knew Bach personally and heard his music certainly understood what a giant he was, but it took nearly a century for his true value to be widely realized. If Bach's outer life was rather mundane, it is abundantly clear that his inner life was rich, deep, and radiant. Perhaps no single event in Bach's life was as dramatic as his improbable meeting in 1747 with the Prussian king Frederick the Great. Bach was then 62, Frederick only 35. The young king had acceded to his throne in 1740 and had immediately embarked on a campaign to expand his territory and his influence. In 1745, his troops had laid siege to Leipzig during his campaign against Austrian and Saxon armies. To avoid a sacking of the city, the Leipzig authorities had tactically surrendered, and when the Prussian army withdrew after the short siege, the city fathers of Leipzig had commissioned Bach, their municipal Kapellmeister, to compose a celebratory cantata of thanksgiving. One can well imagine that Bach had mixed feelings about the young monarch. Now Frederick, despite his aggressive military posture, was an intellectual, a philosopher king in tune with the winds of the French Enlightenment, which has laid the basis of so much of our modern world. Frederick loved opera, that relatively young, public, and secular form. He himself was a devoted flutist and played regularly in the evening musicales with his court musicians, some of the finest in Europe. Among them was Bach's son, Carl Philipp Emanuel, the court harpsichordist, who was only 2 years younger than the king. Frederick had heard of the elder Bach's improvisatory art and let the son know he would love to meet the father. And so it was 2 years after the siege of Leipzig that Bach made the 100-mile trip to Potsdam, the seat of Frederick's power. Though the trip was ostensibly a family visit, his arrival was immediately made known to the king, who invited Bach to join him that very evening at the Palace Musicale. The official Potsdam press took notice too. Perhaps they were notified by Frederick. This was to be, after all, a meeting of great minds, a collision of two worlds. An account of the evening was duly published and then shared with other newspapers in Berlin, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Leipzig, and Magdeburg. Nothing in Bach's previous life had commanded this kind of public attention. Quite aside from the flurry of publicity, the musical encounter of king and composer spawned one of Bach's greatest contrapuntal masterpieces, Musikalisches Opfer, or Musical Offering, a multi-movement work of unique construction. It was composed in just a few weeks' time after Bach returned home to Leipzig following the brief visit to Potsdam. Quite atypically, Bach took pains to oversee its publication, and he sent a dedication copy to Frederick. So what exactly happened that evening at Frederick's palace that inspired Bach's musical offering? According to press reports of the encounter, the king, after greeting Bach and introducing him to his court musicians, showed off his newfangled forte e piano, an early version of the piano, and challenged Bach to improvise a three-voiced fugue on a particular theme that Frederick dictated to him. This melody, which Bach himself later dubbed the royal theme, is long and unwieldy. Frederick seems to have devised it to be difficult, possibly to stymie Bach, since it didn't allow for easy contrapuntal combinations. The free-thinking Frederick had little love for the older contrapuntal styles of the early Baroque, so closely associated with the church. Given his well-known imperious character, it is evident that Frederick wanted to challenge Bach, perhaps even to see him flounder. But Bach succeeded in improvising an intricate, dramatic, and elegant fugue on the spot, much to the delight of everyone present. The three-voiced Ricercar you will now hear is Bach's polished version of that improvised fugue. At its very beginning, you will hear the melody with which Frederick challenged Bach. In addition to that three-voiced fugue, the musical offering consists of a six-voiced fugue, 10 canons, and a grand trio sonata, all based on Frederick's royal theme. The 10 canons represent 10 different approaches to canonic art, that most strict of contrapuntal challenges for composers. Bach's Promethean mind might well have devised more canons, but keep in mind that the word canon has another non-musical meaning. A canon is also a law. Thus the 10 canons may be said to have biblical resonance. These canons are all puzzle pieces. Each one is a sort of a riddle. They are all presented on the page in Bach's edition in irreducible abbreviated form. Some have subtle clues about their realization in performance, but two of them are accompanied by the words, "Seek and ye shall find," challenging the players to solve the problem of how to perform them in such a way, without Bach's help, that they make coherent music. 9 of the 10 canons, much like our familiar canon, "Row, row, row your boat," are loops. Like a cat chasing its tail, they could theoretically go on forever. And so as performers we must decide arbitrarily how long to play them and how to bring them to an end. Here then are 5 of the 10 canons from the musical offering. The first presents the royal theme again, the theme you just heard elaborated in the harpsichord, but it is now played by the violin, while the flute and gamba accompany with the countermelody in strict canon, the gamba imitating exactly what the flute plays, but 4 beats later. The second of our canons is for 2 voices. We are doing it with violin and one hand of the harpsichord. One hears an extended royal theme in the violin, accompanied by a busy counterpoint in the harpsichord. If you could see the printed music, you might notice that the harpsichordist's music is actually the same music played by the violin, but backwards. Thus, the harpsichord ends with the royal theme, but with all its notes in reverse order. We will play this canon twice, switching roles the second time. The third canon features the royal theme in the flute, and the violin and harpsichord accompany with the countermelody in strict canon, now 2 beats apart from one another, but with this twist: the harpsichordist's melody is the upside-down version of the violin's. The miracle in all these canons, with all these fancy manipulations, is that the result is harmonious, cogent, varied, beautiful music, even as the canonic voices remain absolutely consistent in their imitative counterpoint. In the fourth canon, the harpsichord now plays an elaborate, ornamented version of the royal theme. The gamba enters with a new countermelody, which the violin soon imitates, but twice as slow and upside down. Don't try that at home. Our final four-voice canon is simpler in the sense that all the voices play the same music at the same pitch, right side up, at the same speed, and at the same interval of separation, 7 measures. But it is more complex in that there are now 4 voices. In addition, the royal theme is transformed and spun out into a long, intricate melody, imitated precisely by each successive entry. The result is a ravishing kaleidoscopic composition. The musical offering's grand 4-movement trio sonata serves as our finale. Incidentally, now we have a trio for 4 players. Once again, the gamba and the harpsichord constitute one voice, richly harmonized. You will hear the royal theme throughout, sometimes very clearly stated in its original form, sometimes transformed with new rhythms, but often lurking by suggestion in the chromatic texture. In the sonata, particularly in the affecting 3rd movement, Bach is showing how he can compose in the modern galant style preferred by Frederick and his court musicians, just as well as he can compose learned counterpoint in a vivid, striking way. And in the finale, the fourth movement, Bach turns the austere opening of Frederick's theme into a hearty laugh. Perhaps Bach is showing Frederick who is really king.